As we know, King Aegon was left horribly burned and broken after his terrifying dragon battle, clinging to life by a thread. The episode begins on a lonely road cutting through the thick woods outside the capital city, where a wooden wagon moves slowly through the pouring rain. Inside the dark back of the wagon, King Aegon is lying flat under heavy wool blankets, crying out in pain because his body was severely injured. Sitting right across from him is a clever nobleman named Lord Larys Strong, who is quietly helping the king escape the city. Larys speaks in a low whisper, explaining that they must hide far away in secret while their enemies destroy each other with their dragons. Larys firmly believes that once both sides completely wipe each other out, Aegon can return to the city and take back his throne without ever having to fight again. But then the wagon is forced to a sudden stop on the muddy road. A group of heavily armed soldiers loyal to Queen Rhaenyra completely surrounds them, drawing their sharp swords. The lead soldier walks up, pulls back the cloth curtain, and demands to know who is traveling inside, ordering them to step down and promise loyalty to the queen. Larys instantly realizes they are completely outnumbered and have no way to fight back, so he immediately climbs down into the deep mud and bows his head to surrender. Inside the cart, Aegon completely refuses to move, glaring angrily at the soldiers from the dark shadows. Losing their patience, the soldiers raise their swords to kill them both on the spot. Panicking for his life, Larys screams out the ultimate truth to stop the blades, pointing at the cart and yelling that the burned man hiding inside is actually King Aegon. Larys explains to the shocked soldiers that if they kill them now they will get nothing, but if they deliver the living king to the queen, they will get a massive reward. The soldiers slowly lower their weapons, realizing they have just captured the ultimate prize of the war, and take them away as high-value prisoners. Back at a fortress called Dragonstone, Queen Rhaenyra is in her private room, actively packing her riding gear and preparing to fly her dragon. She genuinely believes that the city guards will willingly open the gates for her to prevent a massive bloodbath. Suddenly her teenage son and heir, Jace, storms into the room and blocks her path, starting a fierce argument. Jace is absolutely furious, telling his mother that she is being incredibly foolish to trust an old friend in the middle of a brutal war. He argues that the offer is almost certainly a trap designed to capture her. Jace then lets out his deep, hidden anger about the 3 new dragon riders she recently hired, arguing that by giving powerful dragons to ordinary low-born people, she has ruined the royal status of the family and put his own future as the next king in serious danger. Meanwhile, inside the spooky, ruined courtyard of a haunted castle called Harrenhal, those 3 new dragon riders are waiting in the dark shadows alongside their giant dragons. Their explicit orders are to hide inside the castle ruins and launch a sudden surprise ambush against the enemy if they try to attack the Riverlands. As the hours pass in complete silence, the atmosphere becomes incredibly tense and uncomfortable. One of the riders begins drinking heavily and loudly telling arrogant stories about his royal blood, which quickly annoys the other serious, hard-working riders. The men begin arguing loudly with each other, their stress and anxiety growing because the enemy never shows up, making them feel like they are completely wasting time while the real war happens elsewhere. Out in the deep, rough waters of the sea, a nobleman named Tyland Lannister stands on the wooden deck of a massive warship. Standing right next to him is a fierce and eccentric female pirate admiral named Shirako Lohar, and behind their ship hundreds of foreign warships fill the ocean. Lohar openly mocks Tyland's soft, polite manners and tells him directly that she does not care about the king or the throne. She reveals her true violent motivation for joining the fight, explaining that she has held a bitter personal grudge against the enemy admiral, Lord Corlys Velaryon, for over 20 years. She explicitly states that her only true goal in this war is to completely destroy his fleet and burn his home castle to satisfy her thirst for revenge. Suddenly, the massive pirate fleet launches a sudden, devastating surprise attack on Lord Corlys Velaryon's ships blockading the waters. The peaceful sea instantly turns into a burning war zone as large rocks and flaming arrows rain down from the sky, smashing violently through the wooden decks of the vanguard ships. Men are thrown into the freezing water as ships begin to break apart and sink into the sea. Standing firmly on the deck of his flagship, Corlys watches the massive enemy fleet approach, spotting Lohar's flagship charging directly at him, driven by pure hatred. Corlys decides to use her blind anger to his advantage, ordering his helmsmen to turn their ship directly into a highly dangerous, narrow water pass filled with sharp underwater rocks known as the Teeth. Back at Dragonstone, Jace and his sister Baela see massive columns of thick black smoke rising from the distant ocean horizon. Completely ignoring their mother's strict commands to stay safely behind, Jace mounts his dragon and Baela mounts hers, launching into the sky and flying at maximum speed toward the naval battle. They dive out of the heavy clouds like predators, catching the enemy fleet completely off guard. The 2 teenagers command their dragons to burn the enemy lines and massive, continuous streams of dragonfire rip across the water, burning the wooden ships, exploding their weapon supplies, and turning several enemy warships into floating bonfires, saving their family's fleet from total destruction for a moment. The battle reaches a peak of violence inside the narrow, rocky pass. Lohar's fleet blindly pursues Corlys' ship into the highly dangerous gap where the water currents are wild and erratic, and two large enemy warships are pushed directly into the sharp hidden rocks. Their wooden hulls split completely open, and they sink instantly into the ocean with all their crew. However, through great sailing skill and brutal discipline, Lohar manages to guide her primary flagship safely through the deadly rocks. The exact moment they clear the gap, she screams at her crew to row at maximum speed, aiming the sharp front of her warship to ram Corlys' ship directly. Suddenly, the situation becomes even more chaotic and terrifying as Rhaenyra Targaryen appears in the sky riding her newly claimed wild dragon, Sheepstealer. Because she has absolutely no experience as a rider and the dragon is completely untamed, the beast goes into a wild frenzy. Agitated by the thick smoke, bright fire and loud noise of the battle, Sheepstealer completely refuses to follow Rhaenyra's frantic commands. The dragon begins breathing massive amounts of fire everywhere, burning both enemy vessels and friendly ships alive. The wild dragon then spots Baela and her dragon and views them as an enemy threat, snapping its jaws and aggressively chasing her through the smoky sky, forcing Jace to steer his dragon into a dangerous, fast dive to block the wild dragon's path and protect his sister. While maneuvering low over the chaotic water to avoid the wild dragon and burn more enemy targets, Jace flies too close to the enemy decks. From her flagship, Admiral Lohar spots the low-flying dragon, and showing incredibly fast reflexes, she aims a massive heavy spear-throwing weapon and fires a giant metal arrow directly at them. The weapon strikes Jace's dragon heavily in the chest, causing the wounded creature to lose all control, thrash in extreme pain, and crash violently into the raging sea. Jace manages to unclip himself from the sinking saddle and surfaces, gasping for air, but he finds himself instantly surrounded by enemy warships. A dozen enemy crossbowmen line up on the deck and fire a brutal barrage of arrows directly into him, striking him multiple times until he loses his physical strength and slowly sinks beneath the blood-stained water to his death. In the final brutal moments of the naval fight, Lohar's flagship rams into Corlys' main ship with tremendous, bone-crushing force, breaking the legendary vessel completely in half. Splinters of wood fly everywhere as Lord Corlys Velaryon is thrown violently into the rough, debris-filled sea, disappearing completely beneath the heavy waves. The episode draws to a dark close amidst burning wreckage, floating bodies and thick smoke. Corlys' brave son Alan manages to pull himself onto a surviving ship, and seeing the complete destruction around him, he refuses to give up. He draws his sword, rallies the surviving, terrified soldiers, and takes full command of the remaining fleet to launch a desperate final counterattack against the enemy forces.